This is the Final Word Cricket Podcast with Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon in the heart of Nagpur, the VCA Ground here in the middle of the city, or roughly the middle of the city, the old Test ground. We've been at the stadium for the last 4 or 5 days, Geoff, setting up and covering the 3-day Test match, but a day off of sorts we've been working throughout on the podcast, but we thought, what better opportunity to return to not only a Test venue, but the ground where Australia won in 2004 to claim the Border Gavaskar Trophy in India for the first time. Of course, when they won previously in 1969, Sunil Gavaskar hadn't even made his debut for India, nor had Alan Border for Australia, and they've won 1 in 16 times since. So it feels like a happier hunting ground and a gorgeous old-fashioned little stadium here with the shops on the outside, the apartments now on the far side of the ground, which probably weren't there when they were playing cricket. An under-25 representative game going on behind us, and no better setting for our weekly show this week.
And thanks to Milian Bai, who's up the back and who's helping us out, guiding us around the stadium and showing us how to not kill ourselves by falling over the construction site bits. There are some stairwells that have seen better days and so on. I'm not sure what the plan is for this ground in the future, but it's very important to get the difference between the VCA stadium and the VCA ground, because you could end up at the wrong one and you might be fairly unhappy if you did.
Well, I suppose there would have been tourists who came to watch the Test match this week who'd rocked up here and this doesn't feel like where they're playing the Test match, because it is a bit dilapidated these days.
You can buy an apartment here, though, and you can just come out and sit on your balcony and watch the under-25. So it would be a nice, relaxing... There are people who you know and who I know who would love to own a place like that.
Well, there are grounds where you can do that, notably. Somerset, Chelmsford... Bristol, of course. The
overhanging the Gabba these days.
Overhanging the Gabba.
You can get an apartment.
I love being at grounds like this, though, Geoff. I have a really fond recollection of one of my school holidays. I was thinking about it before. It would have been in year 10, winter holidays, the fortnight of school holidays, and I went around to visit every suburban VFL/AFL ground that had been decommissioned. So I spent an afternoon traipsing around Victoria Park, Arden Street, went through Princes Park, which still had footy being played at the time.
I went
to Western Oval. I did. I also went to Arden Street, which of course North was still using, but went back to Glenferrie, where I'd spent a lot of time as a kid watching Hawthorn train. I wonder what my parents thought of me, by the way. He's got 2 weeks off school and he's just kind of pottering around these old footy grounds. But I've always had I don't know, it's something about places where important stuff happened and doesn't happen anymore, but you can still kind of have some feel for the place, and you absolutely can here. It's a pristine ground. The grass is cut beautifully, and the cricket we were watching before was of a pretty high standard. So I'm glad it's still the administrative centre of cricket in this state. And
the sun is setting. You're getting that. It's going to become that orange ball of fire pretty soon in the orange city. I mean, it's a pretty nice place to be. When you've been in the heart of cities like Delhi and like Kolkata and like Mumbai, where it's about 20 to 30 times more intense in terms of traffic flows, in terms of population and so on. It's quite nice to be in Nagpur. It's the end of winter. The temperature is gentle. The end of winter means about 30 degrees, by the way. But it's not 38 degrees. So there's that sort of difference. And we have a bit of time. We have a bit of time to ponder things. We were trying to figure out how we would fit a weekly show in between 2 Test matches when there were 3 days and one was a travel day, and we had to do setup for the radio broadcasts and all the rest of it. So in that sense, the Australian team have done us a favour by giving us a little bit of breathing room. It has been interesting, looking at the response to that Test match, just how pissed off a bunch of people are getting about it. I'm always fascinated by that curious. It's a non sequitur, really, but where you put a moral lens on sporting failure. I didn't want it hard enough, too soft, blah blah. Like you're going to morally judge someone for missing a straight ball rather than look at it as they did a cricket thing badly.
Of course, I mean, how many footy analysts get a job on the back of saying that the team that's in front wanted it more? There's a couple of commentators that cop that criticism on Twitter, I've noticed, and there's a lot of it. And look, I don't want to speak ill of casual cricket fans, because that's the lifeblood of the game in Australia. It's why it's ubiquitous in the summer, because it's not only people like us who follow the game, it's a lot of people who drop in for a couple of months in the summer and take an active interest in a series like that, and that's great. But it probably can lead to reductive conclusions you're describing there, like Andrew McDonald. It's his fault because he's the coach and didn't want it enough, and they're too soft, and all the rest of it. And if Justin Langer was there, I did see a bit of that from sort of the usual suspects, and you can disregard most of it because a lot of it's parochial and a lot of it's coming from a place that is less informed, I suppose, than the guys that made that decision, like the guys that live in that dressing room, for example. But still, it's a natural response. When they lost in Dhaka in 2017 to Bangladesh in the first Test match, there was a similar kind of response. It was, this is the most disgraceful day in Australian Test history, ignoring the fact that Bangladesh had played brilliantly in conditions that suited. And of course, the conditions at Nagpur did suit the home side. And there's obviously going to be a lot of speculation around the surfaces that Australia get in the next 3 weeks. And Rohit Sharma put it really well last night, I thought, in the press conference. And Brat picked up on this in his analysis. He said, Rohit Sharma, that India have been playing in challenging conditions at home, not crazy sort of lottery conditions, but challenging conditions at home for a number of years. So, and they've conquered those conditions. I mean, they've won 43 Test matches in the last 10 years at home and lost 2. So they know how to play here.
Right.
It's sides that come here, and Dan Brettig had this in his analysis in The Age. You don't need to prepare a raging Turner or a dust bowl or whatever you want to call it if you're the Indian side. All you need it to be is a little bit tricky because you've got the skills to pay the bills in that setting, but it still feels foreign enough to make it really hard for players who haven't grown up in these conditions. It all makes sense to me.
Interesting that the day after the Test match, the pitch is still the main character. I know we've been guilty of this as well. We all talked about the pitch. I wrote about it. We had the selective ordering thing, the doing one side and not the other. We had India's left-handers dominated and Australia's left-handers absolutely taken apart. But even after the match was over, and I mean, I'm pretty confident. It's sort of speculative, but I'm pretty confident that the pitch was basically what made them pick Peter Hanscom in the Test team, because they wanted another right-hander. They were worried about the left-handers thing. And that in turn meant that it was a Renshaw versus Head selection for number 5. And so the surface force changes to the Australian 11. I'm fairly confident about that. And then they tried to get out there and play on it, have some training on it on day 4. And as we mentioned at the start of the Gary Kirsten interview, which went up yesterday, they were stopped from doing that by the ground staff, who I'm sure completely independently and at no direction of anybody went out and watered the track at night after everybody had left the stadium when the Australians
I think it, to be in fairness, I think it was still the afternoon, but it was like much deeper into the afternoon.
But it was once the place had cleared out.
Exactly.
The Australians had asked the ground staff, please leave this, don't touch it. They said, yep, no worries, sort of India style. Tell people what they want to hear, and then went ahead and watered it anyway.
Crucially, it was after the Australians had left the ground. I think that's the key reference point there. So, they haven't been training today. They are going to train there tomorrow morning, but the nets were also watered, like the nets they were going to use. So, I suppose.
The practice pitches, the ones that were on the along
the sides.
Right.
Yeah.
They got watered as well.
So they'll be able to use the nets tomorrow.
They could have,
which will be different kind of practice.
Sure, but the nets obviously didn't prepare them very well for the Test match.
True enough.
They got absolutely taken apart in, 32 overs, 33 overs?
I think it was inside 34, but still it was, Australia's lowest score in India ever, so that stands out. And just to kind of double back on that piece of analysis, this is exactly what's going to... The soil might be different in Delhi, and Andrew McDonald made reference to that this morning at his media engagement. The history of Delhi, the most recent Test match there was a high-scoring draw and all the rest of it. But, why would India prepare anything other than what they prepared at Nagpur? They won't prepare a raging Turner, because that would be silly. That becomes a lottery like Pune, and they paid the price for that in 2017 because it makes it a shootout, and sometimes you lose a shootout.
Sure.
This was far more tailored to ensuring that their extraordinarily skillful spinners in Ashwin and Jadeja were able to do their thing, as they always do. They're still very much at the peak of their powers, which was always going to be challenging for the Australian batters. But on the other side of the ledger, it was never going to be explosive enough to make it a lottery for a player like Rohit Sharma, who was serene throughout his stay from the moment he hit 3-4s in 4 balls from Cummins at the start. And why would it be any different when they travel up to Delhi? It should be the same. It's in their interest, and that is the right thing.
If you've been a long time listener to this show, I think it's notable that you and I are in India together. I came here in 2016. You came here in 2017. We've never been here together. We've spent the last 6 or 7 years saying that people have got to go to India. We have finally gone to India. We are here. I had just a couple of moments tuk-tuking around in the city as we've been doing our errands around the day, just feeling really happy to be somewhere interesting and different and weird and vibrant and all of these unfamiliar things in a really good way. It has its challenges as well. There's very little that goes in a straightforward way in India, and so we had an interesting week leading up to and during the Test in Nagpur.
Yeah, I was reading Mike Howard's book Cricket Beyond the Bazaar, which is kind of his defining text about cricket in the subcontinent. That was written in 1990, and there's a line in the opening, one of the opening passages, which says that you can't be indifferent about India. Like it forces you to feel strong emotions, be it what you're saying there, exhilarated by the vibrance of the place and just how intense the whole thing is, and the sounds and the smells and just the way in which conventions that we've grown up with don't apply here. You know, even the way that there's no real traffic rules or anything like that. You just kind of roll with it. And Brat, who's travelling with us, of course, his attitude's always like, everything works out in the end. You just need to sort of trust the process, trust the energy. And it can take a while to surrender to that. But, you know, it's not as though it's our first rodeo here. We have been in India before. We've travelled in other parts of Southeast Asia. We've covered cricket in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and we've been through other parts of Asia. Well, that's subcontinental Asia and Southeast Asia as tourists, and you studied over there too. You know, we know what it's like to be in unfamiliar terrain, but it's never easy. It does take some adjustment, and it's about balancing out the tricky bits and remembering that this is a privilege to be here. It's
there's also, you know, Bharat has got me in the headspace of, there's a Hindi phrase, aram se, which is like, cool it. Take it easy, you know, chill out. And that's what you have to keep doing all the time here. We rocked up, we got an Airbnb house with a few of us who were doing radio commentary, which seemed like a pretty good get. It was like 5 minutes from the stadium. It seemed to be in a little suburban enclave. The stadium's, you know, well outside the city. We thought, well, that'll be easier than going back and forth to town. Cool, no worries. If you've ever done internet dating, you know that it can be perilous to rely on images and descriptions,
relying on the photos
from the internet, that you don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen.
This had its height listed at 6'4" when it was actually 5'2".
Yeah, exactly. So we started driving out there, and the maps tells you to go down this highway and pull a left. We get to the point to pull a left, and the entire side of the highway has been excavated. There's like a 6 metre drop to the road that we're supposed to turn left onto. We're like, oh, hello, okay, this isn't going to work. Ended up doing this wild, circuitous route where we had to drive the wrong way down the highway against traffic, pull off onto it wasn't even a dirt road, it was just kind of made of rocks, and like off-road it down this rocky track in this taxi with this driver who's getting increasingly unhappy about being asked to go out here. Finally got to this place, which was like a weird little island of row houses just in the middle of this paddock in the middle of nowhere with this half road leading up to it, and it's like, well, this is it, this is where you live. No phone reception, the internet doesn't work, so you've got no way to get transport and get out of here unless you pre-arranged it. And we didn't last there very long. We retreated to the city within 24 hours.
The worst bit for me was when Nikesh, who I'm working with for SEN, and I thought we would just get a car back to the place. Yeah, it was going to be a bit of a trek, what you're describing there, but we'd done it once.
Once you've done it the first
time,
we
knew what we were doing. We had a feel for it and all the rest. It took us 90 minutes to get home. And we were holding on for dear life in a tuk-tuk along those roads you're talking about.
You were off-roading in a tuk-tuk.
We really shouldn't have been doing it, but we were so desperate to get into any vehicle by that stage. And again, that's when, they're the bits when you're like, this is really hard. I've got to keep my cool, keep my composure, make good decisions. And we probably made a bad decision there. Like we were like, we snatched it a little bit. There was a took, like, we'll just get it and it'll be okay and we'll roll with it. And it could have been dangerous, but I hope my family aren't listening to this, who've promised that I'll take care here after the car accident I had in Pakistan last year. Anyway, but yeah, that was the situation. We didn't perhaps keep our cool, and we've probably been a little bit better in the last couple of days.
You were Matthew Renshaw on day 3.
And we were Matthew Renshaw on day 3. And look, to be fair, that was the day when we'd arrived at the commentary box the day before the Test match, and there was rat shit all over the desk, and that prompted a certain degree of.
It was gravity fed. So we got to the ground. We found the TV operation had taken one entire end of the ground. It was all theirs. So radio was being sent down to a few little booths at the very far end in the other grandstand. And when you set up a radio booth, you come in. There's basically nothing there. You've got to bring in all the cabling, lay in the effects lines, the sound lines, the data lines for the internet, get the power turned on, all the rest of it. And you have to do a lot of cabling from one box to another. And so there were these temporary roof panels. We thought, okay, no worries. We'll just move the roof panel and pop the cable through. Every time you moved a panel, a shower of desiccated rat shit came pouring out of that panel and just doused whatever was underneath it. So it was like hazmat material stuff. We needed the full Walter White get-up to be working in there. God knows what we've been breathing in over the last few days. We cleaned it up the best we could with like cans of spray antibacterial and paper napkins, but like, holy shit. shit. It was not a nice way to set up.
I suspect no one's used those radio boxes since the stadium opened in 2008, which
probably
didn't help the situation. Like, it was clearly an afterthought that radio was coming in
that would
to
have
do
been,
the series.
that would have been after All India Radio stopped doing it, probably.
Yeah, which is at least, I think they stopped doing test matches week in, week out in 2011 or thereabouts, when they formally stopped going to the grounds.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's probably not a bad benchmark. A dozen years perhaps since they'd had any sort of use in a meaningful way. So everything was tough. And that was the afternoon.
And the electricity kept dropping out every half hour or so. The Wi-Fi
including on
kept
morning
not
one.
working.
So I'm going to we're doing our little, behind the curtain, bit indulgent. But it's fun. You do your half an hour build up, and it's pretty common. You've got lots of commitments to get through in that first half an hour. You're taking the toss. You're trying to take the national anthems. It's like you got to have your wits about you when you're hosting, as I was that morning. And then a minute before I was meant to start my opening spiel, off goes the electricity. All hell breaks loose. Everything drops out. And that happened 3 times in between going to air and the end of my first commentary stint, 20 minutes into play. It's just like, hold on and go for the ride and get out the best you can. Now, to the credit of the staff at the VCA Stadium, they realised that things weren't all well, and they got everything sorted probably by tea on day 1, and it was smooth sailing on day 2 and day 3. But yeah, when you combine that with the rat shit everywhere, it made for a tough start.
There's also that thing that no journalist from the Times of India is allowed to come into the stadium.
Be careful here. I don't want to lose our accreditation.
No, I'm just noting a thing that is true, that some people high up at the VCA have set against that paper for some reason that is lost to us in the midst of time, but it still carries on to this day. Even when the ICC was running that stadium as a venue during the World Cup, the State Association still would not let anybody from the Times come in.
And we're going to be back here in October, November. I believe that 4 World Cup games will be played here. That's the word on the street. I know these things change pretty quickly, but it's entirely possible we'll be here watching, I don't know, Australia take on... are the West Indies form? No, they're not. They're in the qualification tournament, aren't they? Australia playing. Help me out here. Afghanistan. I was going to say Afghanistan, but they may not play Afghanistan. They might be playing Pakistan in Pakistan.
Could be playing Sri Lanka.
They could be playing Sri Lanka here. There you go. There's a country who are automatically qualified for the World Cup, who Australia could conceivably play.
You're just like, no, not that one.
Not that one. Yeah, that's right. So it won't be our only visit to probably this part of the world in 2023, and we'll have a much better handle on it next time. In terms of what Australia do with the India piece of the puzzle here, we've already discussed the conditions. They do have at their disposal a number of players returning. I think that's important to remember. Not just who they are, but what they represent. You talked about Peter Handscomb, who I thought played well, by the way. Whether it was for reasons of the pitch or otherwise, and being a right-hander. If Green comes back and he can be the second quick, suddenly they can play 3 spinners with no concerns whatsoever. Remembering that the second quick in India, Mohammad Siraj, we joked about on the Daily Show yesterday, bowling 1 over and 8 for the Test match. Yeah. And they bowled twice. Australia bowled once. Boland bowled, 16 out of 130 odd overs or something in the first innings, or the only innings where Australia were fielding. So they could get away with Green playing that role, and that opens them up to having Agar in the side, who is a more than competent cricketer with the bat.
But they don't want to pick him, or he doesn't want to be picked because he thinks he's bowling so badly in the nets, and they're bringing Kuhneman in.
Sure, I get that, but bigger picture, the batting of Agar, I think they'll find a way. They could easily find a way through that, where Agar could stabilise the batting lineup, and that's no sign of weakness, extending your batting right. So Green could enable that to play out, and yes, that would mean they'd have to dispense with one of the top 6, and Renshaw would be the obvious one, given Renshaw struggled, and it would mean another right-hander in the top 6. And Ashwin to left-handers is just, he's maybe the greatest ever bowler to left-handers. It's probably
Stuart Broad or Ashwin, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Certainly in modern times. That's what they got ahead of them in Delhi next week, and when we go there I guess we're going to go there in 2 more nights in the hotel we've got at the moment.
In a couple of days. And we're going to do a live stream show in Delhi as well.
Now, we're going to do another YouTube video to provide more detail on this. So if you're watching us on YouTube and you're from India, we'll get you more info on this, but it'll be Tuesday night, India time. We will be doing a YouTube live kind of an abridged version of our live show, more a Q&A type thing. We're just working out the details at the moment, but that should be fun.
Yeah, with a very special guest.
Yes.
Just going to say, all right, keep your eyes on the channel.
One more thing I'm going to say. We're going to break off the YouTube now. If you want to continue listening to this podcast and the conversation we're going to have about the issues around the world in the week, all you need to do is find Final Word Cricket in any podcast provider, Apple, Spotify, Friendster, ICQ, AOL Messenger, wherever else the final word appears, but specifically Apple and Spotify. You can do that. You can listen to what we do. Subscribe there as well. And we're going to keep making these YouTube videos throughout the course of the Border Gavaskar series and well beyond as well.
The Lost Cities of Friendster.